Hey there, welcome to the Faces of Marketing podcast, where we talk about the human stories and lives of different people and perspectives in the marketing profession and entrepreneurs and movement makers. This is your host, Ryan Buchanan, and I'm here with my dynamic entrepreneur friend with more than 9 lives, and you'll hear about that in a second, Anna Chaud. Anna is founder and CEO of Garden Bar, the fast-growing chain of restaurants serving healthy, fresh salads and wraps here in Portland, Oregon. Welcome to the show, Anna.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
so glad to be here today. Thanks.
Yes, and you just reminded me, and I should have known this, that today is International Women's Day, and so this is a special celebration of that.
Yes, it is.
Awesome. So 6 weeks ago, you and I, but you gave a kind of a TED-style talk to, there was about 300 execs in the room, and you inspired all of us in the audience to never feel like it's too late in our life to do something totally different. And I think the title was something along the lines of 9 lives. And I kind of forgot in your speech if you're on your like 7th life or 10th life or like where is Garden Bar in your 9 lives?
On my 9 lives. So the talk was about the magic is in the leap and what makes us leap from one life to another. But when I was reflecting on my journey to where I am today, I realized I had these different lives, and I'm actually on my 9th right now, but maybe approaching a 10th and figuring out how to leap to that 10th instead of being pushed to that 10th. So we'll see.
So cool. It was such a cool, like, different perspective. I know my wife was in the room and lots of other entrepreneurs, and it was just like, gosh, like that. When you really get self-reflective about that leap and that transformation, it's so scary, but then that's where you like learn and grow the most in that transition. Yeah.
Yes, I agree, and I think most importantly, it's because we have this idea that our paths have to be linear, and it has to be a sequential series of events that lead to whatever it is that we want to do. And I think for me was looking back and realizing my path was not linear, and I had to go into different industries. I had to go into different positions until I reached where I'm today. But obviously, the collection of experiences from all those labs is where I gained the experience that I needed to make what we're doing today happen. But it's something that's hard because when we're younger, we're taught that we have to pick a career, and then we get a job, and then we get promoted, and then I get to this, and so we dream and fantasize about this path that's ahead of us, and then some of us don't have that, and that's where we struggle with it.
Yeah, it's like where I am in my life of having not only my own my oldest daughter about to go to college in a year, just over a year, but also being really close with like my nephews and nieces who are just about to graduate from college. And my family, even though I have a family full of entrepreneurs, somehow society just has us thinking so linearly about like, well, get this first solid job, and then maybe get one more, and then you can maybe think about starting your company, or then you can, take a year off to travel, or, and it's hard to be open to that when you're a parent wanting something safer or like stable for your kid,
It's so true. And that's for me, it was harder because I grew up in a country where, college.
You were in São Paulo, Brazil. Yeah.
College is a privilege, and not everybody has the opportunity to go to college. And so what happens is you feel that pressure to choose a profession that's going to be big and it's going to be it, right? And at 18, who knows? Some of us do. Some of us know that we want to be an attorney or whatever that is, but a majority won't know. So we pick something, and then we don't find ourselves, and we either progress because it's a good job, because it pays well, because it has safety, or we choose to say, okay, I need to figure something else out. But it takes a lot of work mentally and a lot of self-acceptance to figure out that you're not the one who figured out what they wanted to do when they were 18.
Awesome. Yeah. So as we always do in this podcast, we start at the beginning. So I want to know more about like what it was like growing up in São Paulo, and what were you like as a little girl and family and all that. Yeah.
Well, if you know anything about São Paulo, it's a big city.
One of the world's biggest,
It's
isn't
one
it?
of the world's biggest. Yeah, I think that São Paulo metro right now is about 20 million people. So it's a different pace of life. You know, it's very much like New York. It's bustling. It's busy. You're traffic. I had to learn how to navigate the bus system in an early age and get places. And so it's just really being able to get out there and not be afraid, which was very helpful to me. But, you know, we grew up as, you know, a middle-class family. We had everything we needed. I went to a private school. My mom was an attorney. My dad was a civil engineer. But they were first generation in Brazil. And so for them to, again, go to college, it was a privilege. And they wanted to make sure that I had that same opportunity. But for the most part, I had a great childhood. I mean, São Paulo was the big thing. And then for vacations, we would go to our beach or we go to the countryside and spend some time with nature and, you know, and enjoy being instead of having downtime. And we spent months for vacations in these places.
Do you have siblings or?
I have a sister that's about 4 years younger than I am. We're very, very close. She lives in the U.S. now, and so it was good. It was growing up. I was always very active, and I think what I remember from my childhood is I never really had downtime. I guess I just brought this over to my career right now. But I was either dancing. I mean, the biggest thing for me was it was my dance career, as I call it. I danced a lot, but I was, you know, playing an instrument or learning a second language or whatever that was that I had to do. But I was always very much I was always very enthralled about learning, and that's something I bring with me to this day.
What kind of so our mutual friend Jill Nelson is salsa and like ballroom dancer.
Yes.
What is your style of dance that you really dug?
So I danced classical. I started at 6 years old, and I danced classical for a long time. I took classical ballet until I was about 18 when I had to go to college, right? And I but then I did some a lot of jazz. And so I started college when I was 16. So when I was 16, I started college. I danced for another 2 years. And then 18, I started getting internships. So I had to give up my dance dream. I thought for a long time that I was going to become a dancer, a ballerina, or something like that. But I decided that there was not a good path for me. So
were you 2 years younger than everyone? All of your peers going to college that early, or is that normal to go to college at 16 in Brazil?
I was a year younger than everybody else. I started school earlier, so I was 16 when I started. Most people were turning 17 or 18 that year, and then I graduated when I was 20. So, which was great, but it felt like a little early. I felt like I wasn't ready yet to tackle the business, you know, and do what I needed to do, which is what led me to come to the U.S. But yeah, so that's when I stopped dancing at 18, and then I continued dancing for fun, you know, and then I went to teach aerobics, and then just recently I taught a lot of Zumba, and
Very
then I
cool.
picked up salsa, and yes, Jill and I, we like the salsa clubs. Just lately, I started picking up partner dancing. I've always been a stage dancer, which is very different because you have bigger movements in stage. Where partner dancing, you have to have smaller movements, you know, and you're
kind of dramatic.
Yes,
so I know you like the
am.
bigger movements.
I am. And if you do that in a dance floor in a salsa club, you hit everybody in the face because you're always slapping somebody with your big arms. So I have to contain my arms. And so I'm learning different skills. But I do love Latin dancing, partner dancing.
Yeah, it's so filled with emotion.
It really
it's
is.
awesome.
And
Yeah.
it's great.
So going back to when you were a 10-year-old girl, and I know this question, I was reminded from, I think you know Lou Raja, who grew up in the Congo, and
Yes.
he's like, this is the most American question you could possibly ask, but like, it's so common in the States of, especially back east. It was like, I got asked this 100 times when I was 10 years old. Was like, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And I always wanted to be like Isaiah Thomas or Michael Jordan or, some, NBA point guard. But what, if you were to be asked that question, what would you have said as a 10-year-old girl?
I wanted to be a prima ballerina, of course. I would look at the Bolshoi and I saw Anna Pavlova dancing, and I saw, all the Baryshnikov was the man I wanted to marry. That was what I really wanted to do. But growing up in a third world country, that the possibilities of that happening is just so small. So I wanted to become a doctor. That was what I thought. But mind you, it comes with the background that when in the country that we were, like for us, there were like maybe 3 or 4 professions that you would think of if you wanted to be somebody. And that would be an attorney, you would be a doctor, you would be an engineer, and maybe a dentist or something like that. But you always felt that those were the 4 big ones that you wanted to be, and if you wanted to become somebody, that's what you go for. So I
Were
only
your
had
parents any of those 4?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
My dad was a civil engineer. My mom was an attorney. But my mom had a really big story because she grew up in a time where women were not allowed to go to college. Women were not allowed to go to school. She was not able to even go to law school until after her parents died. She was forced into becoming a teacher.
You saying that.
So I had to see that sort of like, I had to see her have to find her place in the sun and know that was possible for me.
My mom, she was an entrepreneur, started 45, 50 years ago as an art consultant. So she represented artists, almost like a mobile art gallery, to banks and law firms and all of that had really, beautiful sculpture or art and things like that. And she was one of few women entrepreneurs 50 years ago, just hustling and making it happen, and is a strong-willed woman who is one of the most entertaining and fun-loving women too. But you have to have a lot of confidence to make it when the systems are kind of working against you a little bit.
Exactly. And, it's no news to anybody that Brazil was more of a machismo culture. So, women had to take a step back, although my mom tried, she was really definitely the person who just had the reins of the home and the decision making and the entrepreneur spirit. But it's a funny thing because she was also not the mom that was at home when we came from work, and my friends all had moms that would come and make homemade mayonnaise and all that, and I had a platter of vegetables, which is where it sparked my entire love for what I do, because my snack was, I didn't have cookies, I didn't have cake, I had a platter of crudité, as we call it, and there was always these sections of 4 or 5 different vegetables and a little bit of salt, and that's what I ate.
Did you have any friends wanting to eat at your house that are like, I want to go where the candy and like the cakes and all that, like they're like,
No.
Anna, no, like
No.
you eat your like twigs and
We
berries
had
and
no fun little things. We just didn't have the cookie. I dreamed about going to have play dates so I could have the fun things, but it served me well, and it is my comfort food. And to this day, when I'm stressed, I cut up a bunch of vegetables and I just put a lot of salt in it, and that's what I crunch and I eat and I crave it. And I raise my kids the same, so they have the same desires. But
How old are your kids?
I have 14-year-old and 12-year-old.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, 2 boys.
2 boys.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yes, 2 boys.
They eat a lot, I'm sure.
Oh my goodness, yes they do.
Yeah.
They do. It's getting to that phase.
Yeah. That's where all your margin is going in Garden Bar.
It's insane. Yes.
Okay, so high school, so I got an image of where you went to the beach with your family and you're into dance, and when you get away, you go into nature and stuff like that. But in high school, did you hang out with other creative folks who were in drama and dance and things like that, or what was high school like for you?
I grew up during dictatorship. Very important notice. Our school is more of a military school, so there was no such a thing as creative. It was terrible.
You had to wear uniforms.
We had to wear uniforms. That we had sports, of course, and I played volleyball, but it was very academic. It was very academic. I was the academic kid, studied a lot, getting good grades. It was just that kind of school. There was some fun, of course, and I had friends, and we had a blast. But my friends were very tight and all that stuff. But it wasn't the type of school where we have little plays, but it wasn't fostering creativity. It's one of those things where, okay, this is how you solve this math problem. And if you try a different way, nope, can't do this, So there was a little element of that I had to deal with. Nonetheless, it was a great school. And I went from, kindergarten through end of high school, and then from then to college. So it was my life for a long, long time.
I just had a flashback memory. After I graduated from college, 3 of my best friends and we went to Ecuador, and there was an election happening while we were there for 5 or 6 weeks. And the question is like how elections were happened, and like the marketing of those elections in Brazil, because when we were in Ecuador, there would be on all the tops of the buildings like these loudspeakers, basically saying, this is, Abdallah is the man of the people. And there were like commercials on TV nonstop of this guy who ended up winning, who was like chugging beer with all the people that and they went through all of these dictators basically that were only lasted for 3 months at a time, but it was fascinating because a lot of the cars would have like huge loudspeakers promoting that candidate, and it was just so different than in America. And I just wonder if you were aware at a young age, like how a dictator gets into office. Is it, I mean, we kind of have one in our country right now in the U.S., but like, was it anything like that in Ecuador or no?
No, in Brazil. Sorry. No, it's okay. No, it's good. See, we had a military coup in 1964, and they took over for 20 years. Okay. So it was just a succession of military people that was just, kind of rotating through. And then in 84, we had our first public elected president, and he got assassinated, and it was just Brazil's politics.
And now, currently, it's not a great it's just, scenario either right now, is it?
I don't. It's so embarrassing, right, that I don't have time to follow the politics in my own country. But that's because I work. My entire life is what I do, because that's me, just running the company. But there's definitely mixed feelings. I'm sure that it's funny. I saw a post that our friend Augusto posted it not too long ago, but during the elections, and he and I agreed on that the perception from the world is very different from the perception of people that live in the country. And right. People in the country they have the basic needs to be solved. So it's very different when we compare to what's happening in the United States today, because our basic needs are solved, and over there they still need food, and they still need safety, and there's so many different things that need to be tackled on a very, very primal level. So it is definitely a different perspective. But if you talk to people that are living there right now, some people are really optimistic. Some people are desperate. There isn't. I can't find, at least with the people that I talk to, a consensus yet. And I don't know. I mean, he just took over, right? So we have to figure out and see. But the vision from the outside, yes, it's this big thing, but I can't really speak for it at this point.
No, it's helpful to get that perspective. Okay, so we're going to go back to you're at kind of more of a academic military problem solve in one way type of high school, and you're also really independent because you come home from school and you're making your own meals and things like that until mom and dad got home in the interim, or how?
Well, not really.
Okay.
In Brazil, it's very common to have people that live with you that cook and make the meals and all that stuff. So that's something that we've had growing up, and it doesn't mean that you're rich or anything. This is in America, yes, if you have people, but that for us, we had people who cooked and all that. So I would have stuff that we would eat, but I was independent in a sense that if I had to go places and if I had to go to a dance class or catch up with my friends or whatever, I would go and just take the bus and just do it. But taking the bus is not like taking the Max. It's a little
survival.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're hanging out and there's a ton of people. It's really crowded and you're barely getting in, or the bus never shows up, or it's people. It's really crowded. It's a very different experience, but you learn how to navigate a big city, and I think that was a priceless experience for me because I can go to any big city and figure out how to get myself around. So that's something that I've been trying to foster with my kids from a very early age. They've been taking public transportation. They go places. Nothing has to stop them if I can't take them or if I cannot drive them. They have to figure out a way to do it with public transport, not Uber or Lyft or anything like that. But so I think that's a little bit of what it was. But I was always really, I mean, for me, after school, I obviously had to study. I had to set aside time to study. But it was, how can I do these enrichment classes, and how would I find myself always kind of learning something new and all that.
Yeah. So, so you go to college in the same town, right?
Yes.
And you're gonna pronounce it way better than me. I would just say FAAP. So
yes, FAP, as we say.
Okay, but how do you say the full name?
So it was called Fundação Armando Álvares Penteado.
That was beautiful.
Yes.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
And is it common to go to college in the same city that you kind of grow up in, or?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it is actually. We have a lot of just campuses that are not just in the city. It's very common for kids in Brazil to live with their parents through college. It's just a cultural thing, even though I'm so not used to that anymore. But it is very common. So I would just go to college, come home, and do my thing. But yeah, it was a small university, and I went and I was studying communications, which was like, where did that come from, right? It was I was trying to rebel at the time. It was my way of rebelling.
How is that rebellion?
Because my parents, my mom had gone to become an attorney. My dad was a civil
They had
engineer.
very technical skills.
They wanted me to get one of those professions, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, that it's solid. You got to go to be a doctor, or you're gonna be a lawyer or an attorney, something big like that. And my mom obviously was in despair, saying, "What a waste of intelligence! I can't believe you're not gonna go to one of those things." And I remember thinking, "No, I'm gonna go to communications, and that's what I'm gonna do." And so I did that in rebellion for not going through one of those big things that was gonna take me into this path that was set. And that's when it all started. Then I went to college and I got a degree in communications, but when I was in third year of college, I got an internship at a marketing department of Sharp Electronics.
Oh wow! Okay.
So I did that, and then I stayed there for a while. And when I graduated, they offered me a position as a marketing assistant. After I've been there for a while, being a marketing assistant into the what do you call boom boxes? Electronics, but like the music thing. That you play music on. You know what I mean?
Boombox is
yeah,
perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Boomboxes, CD players, and all that stuff.
That was what you had in the 80s.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this was like late 80s?
So this
early
was
90s.
Yeah.
No,
so this was early 90s.
Okay. Yeah.
Early 90s. Yeah. And then I decided that I needed to get a little bit better business background. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get a master's degree in business in São Paulo. So I was applying to get my graduate degree there. But I was going to switch jobs. I got recruited by a competitor. So Sharp had a competitor called JVC. It's a brand of electronics.
Sure. Yeah.
And then when I was switching jobs, this was beginning of summer here. Our winter there, but summer here. I thought, can I take a couple of weeks and just go and travel before I jump into this job? And they said, no problem. And I said, okay. So I came to the US for an 11-week English as a second language program just to learn English over the summer here and spend the summer.
San Fran or where?
That was in the Bay Area.
Okay.
So it was at a little town on the East Bay called Hayward, and I did that, and then I landed in this country, and went to this BART station. Didn't speak the language, trying to figure myself out, and it was like a day later, and I thought, I don't think I'm gonna go back.
So you spoke Portuguese and
I spoke Portuguese at the time.
Uh-huh.
I knew a little bit of French,
Okay.
and I had learned a little bit of English, in school, but not enough to be able to communicate and get around. And so I started to learn English, and I thought, what if I get accepted into the MBA program here, and instead of going and getting my master's in São Paulo, I'll get my master's in the United States, which is going to make me a little more marketable when I go home. So I decided to pursue that, and I took the GMAT. So I had to really learn English really fast, right? I had like an 11-week stint to go, okay, let's learn this language and let's get this GMAT going. So I got the GMAT.
How did you learn English that quickly? Like, did you just like force yourself to talk to other people,
Yeah.
or were you just listening on your Sony Walkman? Like,
Well, I was living here, so you're immersed.
Yeah,
I was around. Most people were speaking. There were some Brazilians, but I tried to hang out with people who only spoke English, and then I was taking English as a second language. So I was getting my grammar from there and all the structure that I needed to know for the GMAT. So I applied and I got into I got accepted into the MBA program. Then I thought, well, this is going to be a good opportunity. So I called JVC and said, I'm not coming back. Sorry, position is open. And then I I got my graduate degree here instead of São Paulo. And, the plan was I'll get my master's, go back home, and then things change, right?
Yeah. Well, I do want to call out before we move on, like, it sounds like an internship was super foundational. And so you may have that advice for your kids when they get to be that age of like, hey, do whatever you want, but it can be great professionally to get an internship somewhere so that a company knows that you are employable and that kind of thing. Would you agree?
100%. Actually, when I got the internship, I used to go to college in the morning, but when I got the internship, I switched to go to college at night and then to work all day. So I really worked all day and go to school at night. But it was priceless because even though it was an internship, it wasn't an internship with a structured program. It was just, I was basically just an assistant called an intern. But I had exposure to a lot and learning how a corporation works and learning what we had to do and deadlines and things you learn when you were working. But absolutely. And I think what it did too, it showed me that I didn't want to work in a corporation. It was actually pretty good. It was thinking, yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, that is a huge value of that. So, okay, so you're in San Francisco, you get your MBA, and so you're on your 9th life now, and I'm not going to have you go through all of them because I ultimately want to get to like the origin story of Garden Bar.
Okay.
But what was the most interesting life you had professionally between your MBA and where you are now? Maybe just give us like maybe a high level of how crazy winding path you've had.
So this is an interesting one. So when you are a foreigner, you got to remember I am a foreigner. So you don't have the ability to work in this country. You are dying to work in this country. You cannot work in this country legally.
How long did it take you to become a citizen?
Oh, not until I was married. But
Which was 10
I
years?
got married. I got married in 1997. It wasn't until 99, 2000 that I got it. So what's important to think this: once you finish a school program in the United States, at least it was in my time. I don't know if it's still the same. They give you what's called a practical training visa, and they allow you to work for 1 year in U.S. legally.
It's the same. Yeah.
It's the same.
Mm-hmm.
So the story that was really chaotic for me is that I got that practical training visa, and it's not 3 weeks later that my mom dies of a heart attack.
Dang.
So I had this visa, and now I'm like, okay, I gotta go home. I flew the next day, not knowing if I was gonna come back, because I didn't know what was going on. Because you got to see, like, my sister was there, my dad was there, my mom dies in 2 minutes. I don't get to see her, right, after years. And I go back, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with my sister, with my dad. We move out of the house. We're trying to get her things. So I lose 6 months of that visa. Okay. And what happens is, by the time I get back, I have maybe 4 months left. So now I'm looking for a job. And as I'm looking for a job, I get a job at Chaud. But talking about corporation, oh my goodness. Then I was there for 3 months, 3 to 4 months. And the next step is you can have them sponsor you or not. And it was too short of a time for me to commit, because once you're sponsored, you have a 6-year HB1 visa that you have to stay with that company. If you don't, they have to escort you out of the country. So I'm thinking, am I ready for this? So I wasn't, and I went to see my immigration attorney. My immigration attorney said, you have to make a decision fast, because you do not want to be illegal, because we all know about what happens to illegal. So I said, okay, what do I do? She said, go back to school. And I said, I just finished my MBA. How does that work? She said, I don't know. Buy time. And I said, okay, I'll buy time. So that is the transition in my life where I had to go back and go get another student visa to stay legal here, so I would not fall out of status until I figured out what I wanted to do. So that's another life. So now I go back to UC Berkeley to get an interior design degree. I have
Charles Schwab to interior design.
I have not a gene of interior design in me. Not one. But here I am in this classroom, and people are like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm switching careers, And I'm like, they're just, because it was the longest program in that extension thing that I could get. So I did that for another year to apply for another practical visa. And I did that, and I get the practical visa, and they say, yeah, but you need to work in the industry. And I said, no, I'm not going to work in design. There's no way in the world. This is not a designer right here. Oh, that's the only way you can get the visa. So that is where my next big life came before Garden Bar, because what happened was I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I better do this right. So I tried to find out who was the best designer in this town. And then I went to see this woman speak once, and she just blew my mind. And she's still the woman who most influenced me in my life.
She's your mentor?
She was my mentor in a very interesting way. Her name is Suzanne Tucker.
It's a dog-friendly office.
That's
you
cute.
hear
No
scratching
problem. Oh, cute.
Yeah.
So I called their office, and I said, hey, I'd like to intern for you for free. I would just come in and fold your fabrics and do whatever you need to do. They said, we can't do it for free, but we'll pay you $5 an hour. I'm like, great. Thank you. So I came in and started folding fabrics and putting away, stone samples and things like that. And then I started progressing in the company, and then I became a design assistant, and I realized that I hated to design because I don't know how to. And so I thought, okay, what can I do in this company that's not design? And I realized I didn't have a project manager, and that's where I started organizing the business end for them and creating a side of the business that they didn't have. And we grew, and we became a huge company. I started hiring project managers. I started developing processes and procedures, and then I decided, and I was pretty much running the company. And I thought,
you're kind of like the COO, the
pretty
chief
much
operations
of
officer.
of the sort of the operations end, but not so much the financial piece. I was running more like of the processes and procedures and things that we needed to do for project management and all that, and training. And then,
how big was the company?
Then we had grown. I mean, when I started there, we were 6, and then we were about 30 when I left.
So this is your first taste of an entrepreneurial.
This is my
company.
first taste of implementing new things in a company that didn't have it and did not. We were trying to structure, because if you know anything about high-end interiors, we don't have a lot of high-end interiors in Portland. Most people come from Seattle, San Francisco, but high-end interior projects can be long. Like, they can be 5-year homes. They can be homes. So there's a lot of behind the scenes, because these designers make every single thing. Like, they make the welting that goes in your sofa. They make the design. They have to put it in. Things take forever. So there is a lot of organizational behind the scenes that you need to have. So I was trying to figure out ways to make that more organized, timelines, working with contractors and the construction and all that. But then I got to a point where I'm thinking, oh, what's my next life? And then I thought, I want to go to law school. And I know, it sounds crazy.
You are so educated.
I'm thinking I'm going to go to law school. But hold on, I didn't go to law school. I said, okay.
Right.
I said, okay, I am going to go to law school. So I'm going to leave and study for the LSAT. And as I was studying for the LSAT, another designer caught wind that I left this big company and said, hey, do you want to come here and kind of help me do what you did before and implement processes? And I said, sure. I'm studying for the LSAT. I can do this on the side. And then the next designer comes in. And then the next designer comes in. And then 12 years later, I'm doing this all over the Bay Area. I went to Hawaii. I was just basically taking these design firms and architectural firms and restructuring, looking at the financials. So I did a lot of how can we make this better? How can we get more clients? How can we do things?
Productivity, efficiency,
financial analysis.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times they call you because they're not making money. You go in, you assess the financials, and then you figure out that that's because there's an operational issue. So I did that for a long, long time, and it was a very interesting job and career because I had more work that I could ask for, and and it was really a lucrative business. It was a beautiful business, but I got to that point where I felt, oh, it's time to.
You're kind of capped out, and then why Portland?
Because we had our first child, and we were living in San Francisco at the time. And San Francisco is a hard city to be when you have a child. It's not an easy place to move around. So
It's expensive.
It's expensive, but most people end up going to Marin County or different places. And we ended up living and moving to Marin. But my ex-husband and I, that was not our lifestyle. We didn't really enjoy living there so much. It was not our vibe, and we wanted to be in a city again. So we had come to Portland a few times, and we thought Portland was a really good mix of an urban environment, but also a place that you can still raise your kids and send them to public school. So that was a great place to raise a family, and then we moved here, 2008. Then we both quit our jobs and our careers, and boom, leaped. That's how I say it.
Big leap.
Yes.
Okay, so that brings us to Garden Bar, and that started like 5 or 6 years ago.
So we moved here 2008. We got divorced 2009.
Okay.
And then I had this little different lives where I had to go and became a control. Then I'm like, now I got to go back to work because I was a consultant. So now I have to go back and get a job. And I worked as a controller. Then I work as a operations manager for a company called 52 Limited, which
staffing agency, EO company.
Mm-hmm. And then I left 52 and started as another staffing agency with a friend that became my business partner, and we did that. And then Garden Bar came as my idea when my ex-husband and I settled on our house, and he gave me a little bit of money, and I thought, what do I do with this? Do I buy a house? Do I open a business? Do I buy a house? Do I open a business? And I was having dinner and talking to my boys, and my older boy was 9 years old at the time, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do if I buy a house, if I open a business. And he said, if you open a business, you might be able to buy any house you want someday. And I thought,
wise beyond his years.
So I said, that is great advice. I'm doing it. And so that's how I decided I was going to open a business, and the idea had already come to me. So I ended up partnering with my former business partner, and he was in the restaurant business, and so he had knowledge on how to open a restaurant.
I know him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so I brought the business in, and we opened our first store with my little house money.
Where was your
Pearl?
Okay.
Yeah.
Like where exactly?
So it is the location that we have that is across the street from Pablo's bookstore. It's on
cool.
It's on 11th between Burnside and Couch.
Got it.
So right next door to Sur la Table.
Okay. And you have another store that's just like 4 blocks away.
We do. We have one that is Old Town. That's
Yeah,
not
that's-
too far.
yeah.
And that's how we proved the concept. That's how we really, really nailed that this is not a destination concept. It's a convenience concept, because when we had the locations be so close to each other and the bubbles wouldn't intersect. And we realized, okay, we got something here. We got to cluster this. And I thought this was the way for us to be able to capture our market, is by being easily accessible, because it's a life. We developed that as a lifestyle brands, right? So we want to make sure that there is repetition in our guests to come in, but it has to be easy. It can't be something that they're going to drive to, or, so they have to be able to walk to that very easily.
So I want to admit a weakness of mine. I wonder if you have the same weakness or not. And that is that in the past, I think I've gotten better about this, but I used to like never do that much research about something before I just dove right in. And I'm wondering if you did a bunch of research nationally on other similar types of fast casual healthy concepts, one of whom a family friend of mine invested in. I think the biggest competitor that you have more at a national level, they haven't come to Portland yet. What is it? Sweet Green. Yeah, and they've gotten like $250 million of investment. It's like crazy. Like the AOL founder and all these people have invested in them. And I just, it's that to me is really fascinating, because we'll get to this part of the conversation, but investors tend to like to invest in software companies and very scalable, high margin business and all this, and restaurants tend to be more lifestyle business, and it's harder to get a return and things like that. And here you are. Did you set out to do one garden bar location and then like, oh, this is going pretty well? Did it happen organically? Did you do your research, and then when you did it, were you like, oh, I'm going to do a lot of locations and grow really quickly? Or was it more, okay, I'm going to do this one. I like this. This is working well. Maybe I'll try a second one, and then maybe I'll try a third. Like, how did all of that thought process manifest into the business that you have? Just so the audience knows, you have 10 locations now. It's been like rocket ship growth and kind of hair on fire. You have hair, I don't. So your hair could actually catch on fire. But it's been fascinating to watch, and your product is great. Your brand is great. You've done all this like very frugally. So I just want to know all about that stuff.
Yeah.
Go.
Sure. Okay. So to answer the first question, I didn't do a ton of research, but I did obviously some research on our national competitors. So I was very aware of Sweet Green and Chopped, mixed in San Francisco. We used to be Mixed Greens. And understanding the concept and what they did, and both Chris and I looked at it, and we sort of knew that we wanted ours to have the Portland beat, the Portland vibe, as if it was started here. So we didn't want to copy anything or be like them, but we wanted to offer the same idea and the same options to our community. So we did some research on that, and yes, you are correct. I could have done a lot with $375 million in funding, which is what Sweet Green had.
Good
yes,
Lord.
They actually were valued at $1 billion about, and so they did have Steve Case from AOL. So
That's a lot of freaking salad.
It is a lot, but again, it's a total shift on how people eat and how people perceive fast eating. I hate to say fast food, but it's fast eating, because we are giving people the option to get something super fast.
It's good for you.
And it's good for you, and it's not, it's so there is that element of pride of making a good choice. There's element of knowing that you can go that multiple times a week and feel good about what you're eating. So that has really been very valuable. We need to understand that culturally we are a country that likes to pick up something and come back to our desks, right? This is something we do here. We can't get away from it. I mean, we can go and have this slow food movement. It doesn't happen. It's different in Europe. People close their stores for 2 hours. They have food with their families. They have a siesta. We're not going to do that. So let's find a way to make this experience better and provide good food. So yeah, we were able to open our stores in a very frugally, but be able to provide Portland with an experience that hadn't happened before. The good news is that we have the quality of our product and our experience is on par with any competitor. So if they were to come in and go across the street, it's not something that we're going to go, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? It would be something that we would embrace because competition really just validates the concept. So it's like coffee, that is why you have all that. But so yeah, so that's I forget what the other questions were, but
you covered most of them.
I did.
Yeah,
Okay.
So since I was going to ask this question regardless of it being International Women's Day, but that is a segue to ask. You've gotten a little less than $375 million of funding.
Yes, like a little.
But as a female founder, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on how. The statistics are all stacked against you. Like 2 cents out of every dollar from venture money goes to female founders. The other 98% men. What has been your experience in raising money? And yeah, take it from there.
This was my first time ever doing it. Let me preface by saying if I were to do it all over again, it would be a total different thing. Not because of my gender or anything. It's just because I structured that in a very, very confused manner. And I think that, if anything, you need to surround yourself with people that can help you structure that plan. Which, by the way, I'm going to segue to something else. You asked me, and then I'm going to get to this. You asked me if we started the first one and then there was a second
right.
one. Yeah, the question, so it's going to come to that. The answer is no. We knew from day one this was a multi-unit concept. And when you know that, even when I had my first business plan, I already had the growth plan on that document that forecasted how the stores are going to perform, what are we going to do. We just didn't know exactly because you know how that is, and we didn't have a prototype. But once we had the prototype and the second store, we were able to update the business plan to understand what we're talking in volume and understand that having more stores will help us with profitability and returns and all that stuff. So the multi-unit concept was something that we knew from the get-go. That said, it's very hard to fund your first or second stores with investors. So I did have to do a proof of concept with my own funding, which is why Pearl is my flagship, but it also shows that it was very frugally built. Then you have a second one, and that's when we got our investment in. So now going back to the question, it's hard for me to say if it wasn't as difficult to get what I asked for because people believed in the concept and people really believed in me, and I'm forever grateful for my first 8 investors who really went and supported me. The difficulty is that restaurants are hard. I would be able to say, okay, this is, if I had an apples to apples in a concept that was a tech concept that I know it's a home run and nobody's believing in me, I probably would be able to speak more into, okay, is that because I'm a woman or whatever? I don't know, because I know restaurants are something that people run away from. But in my situation, people seeked me out, so it was different. I had people seeking me out. Like 2 of our investors, the original investors, were guests who emailed me. I had a lot of people come and say, hey, so my biggest mistake was that I did not raise enough. And that's the one thing that I would advise people, is that understanding that you don't raise just to build stores. You have to raise to create an infrastructure. And I didn't do that because I feel that's a gender thing. As a woman, I want to make sure that I'm very honest. I'm doing everything. I'm very frugal. I'm not overspending, where I think male entrepreneurs are more. Let's go big. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I could do this. I could do this. And I could do it all myself. And I did that. I ran that, I still run it all. I am a band of one, right? So So that's where I differentiate a little bit.
Yeah, no, I
Does it
and
make sense?
yeah, no, it's funny. So we were talking before this interview started about a panel that you were on with um, women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color, and the different experiences that the three of you had, whether it was raising money or getting a loan from a bank and things like that. And the moderator was like, but let's be clear, like it's always harder for, like the basically had a hard time believing your perspective that people sought you out and that it wasn't as hard as it has been for other entrepreneurs, women, or, as a woman of color, like the statistics are not a narrative that is your same experience. And so it was hard to believe.
Yes, I guess you have to also see the business itself. So this is an example. So you look at Sweet Green, look at how much they raised. Right now, I'm asking.
Who are the founders of Sweet Green?
I don't know their names, but three guys.
Okay. Yeah.
2 or 3 guys. I think they were students at Georgetown. There's a whole story there. But it is also who how you network and all that stuff. But
Right.
but think about that. So if you're an investor, you see that those guys are exploding. Now this, we're riding the health wave, right? This is a first mover in Portland, Oregon. So there is a lot of upside into the concept. They see the lines, they see that we're doing things right. So there's a lot of upside in the concept. I think for me to have an honest perspective on the difference between being harder as a woman or not, I would have to have an idea and a company that is apples to apples with somebody else that is a male, and then I would go neck to neck, right. and then I would do it. But one thing I can certainly say is, now I've been in a lot of pitch competitions, and I also I don't have filter, so I don't have any problems showing up in tech pitch competitions with a solid business, which is how I first pitched to Garden Bar. And I saw all these people in the audience going like, what are you doing? This is a tech event and you're pitching a solid business? And I'm thinking, I don't know, I guess. But one thing that I do notice is that, yes, 90% of the pitches are led by men. Very, very few are led by women. I was MC of a tech event once. EMC, I think you call it, right? The person that
Yeah. Master Ceremony.
And here I am there, and again, panels, the majority are male, and there's very few women. But I think it's changing in Portland, and I think that there's probably other experiences out there. I don't know yet because I have a unique perspective, and restaurants, for example, banks won't fund restaurants at all. But that it would be, if it's me or if it's you, restaurants are just hard because our numbers don't show what they want to see. See, when I go into a bank to ask for a loan or whatever it is, they don't even look at me. All they say is, can you tell me the amount of numbers? And I said, but the numbers alone don't explain the story.
The strategy. Yeah.
Or the story behind it. What do we have? I mean, the numbers alone are not going to do it, and they don't really even want to care about the numbers. About the story. Which these investors, they see the story. They want the story. And so I've been very fortunate. But as I said, if I had to raise 200 million, probably would be a different story. I did not raise that much. So
since this is a marketing podcast, I'm just fascinated to know how you've built this like really tight brand visually as well as it's tech enabled. I know a lot of businesses in the downtown area are, it seems like that's a big growth area that is ordering 20 salads or 50 salads for a big business lunch or that sort of thing. But like your brand has always been locked up, but then is it all word of mouth, or when you open a new store, do people find out about it? Do you do any marketing outside of like MailChimp, templates and like maybe a Facebook ad or something like that? How does it work?
Yeah, our marketing spend is very low. Oh, Lanny, my marketing manager, she does She does so well. We do a little bit of Facebook ads and social. Most of our marketing is organic, but it's also by our partnerships. So our partnerships really mean a lot to us. So if let's say that we're doing a Give Back Friday, and we have one of our partners be the ones that get the
Give
benefit.
an example of a partner.
So, we could do Make-A-Wish Foundation. We have the Bloom Project. We have Schoolyard Farms, or whoever that is that we are fundraising for, Dining Out for Life. They have their own database that when we're doing something for them, not all of a sudden it's being that way, that it's being amplified that way. But we have not been able to spend a lot of money in marketing. I think for us, the marketing is our locations, of course, word of mouth, and the fact that we are able to provide this option that I was mentioning before, because the important thing for when you're creating a brand, and at least in fast casual, is to know who you are. There are a lot of fast casuals that are confused. And the problem with that is that if we don't know who we are and really what we're trying to do, then the guests won't know either. And for us is we know that we want to be the one competing with the pizza that's fast, the burrito at fast, everything that is going to take you less than 2 minutes. That's where we want to be. So we have to do everything we can. And I don't know if you've been to our store lately, the one on Broadway, but we're testing a new flow, which is to figure out ways to get you in and out quicker. So I don't know that we're going to implement that yet, but I'm always looking at better ways to give you efficiency, because you need it and you want it, and that's what we're trying to do, is give you that option to eat healthy and not have to be wait, because if you need it, then you have it,
Awesome. Okay, so last question.
Yes.
And that is the essence of every one of my podcast interviews is describing a specific experience in your life. And you maybe already talked about it when your mom died and going back there, but a moment that typically happened earlier, maybe in your teens or early 20s, that was either a huge challenge or a huge moment of independence that it's not a surprise that you're a successful entrepreneur now. So for me, it's after my freshman year in college, I drove by myself, talked to myself for 5 days straight out to Glacier National Park in Montana, didn't know a soul, met all these, crazy people that became friends, and backpacked like 8 different trips and did all of these like crazy adventure. And I knew that I could go anywhere in the world, live anywhere on my own, and make my own community from that experience. And that, in my mind, helped me like start a company, which was terrifying, but to me it wasn't that big of a deal because I've done things like that from an independent standpoint. Other people have talked about, Kim Malik talked about her dad being incredibly respected as a businessman and going bankrupt when she was in college, and then she worked at this tiny little coffee company called Starbucks, and then all of a sudden it grew like crazy, and she did really well, and then started Salt and Straw. Like, do you have a moment that was either this independence moment or like this, God, I needed a lot of grit and perseverance to overcome this life event?
Yeah, there's 2 very good
extra
ones.
Credit.
I think for me, it's obviously when I landed in the United States. It was June 16th, 1991. It's when I had this blank slate ahead of me. No one knew who I was. No one knew my past. I could start over and do everything I wanted and create my life. And that's what I did. So I always go back to that mentally. I said, I came to this country with on my own, and I did everything on my own, and I figured out my ways, and I met people, and I met my husband at the time. I mean, the whole thing that I created. So to me, I always feel like I've done it once, I can do it again. Sure. But then there was my divorce. I think that's another big aspect. I think I know a lot of women who fear that moment, and I'm not promoting or anything. I mean, I'm lucky I had a really good one, and my ex-husband and I is best friends, and it's great. I know that's not the case for a lot of times, but I feel like being and landing on my own 2 feet and being able to create something from scratch on my own and create this, that was also a turning moment for me. I always go back to those 2 times where I know if everything else failed, I would just start over again, and it's fine. And I've done it twice.
Life number 10.
Like number 10, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Anna.
Thank you.
Awesome conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.